Most people think strength is something you're born with. They imagine that somewhere, there are people who simply don't feel fear, don't hesitate, don't break under pressure. They watch someone remain calm during chaos and assume they were built differently. But they weren't. What you're seeing isn't the absence of pain, it's the memory of surviving it. Every person you've ever called strong carries an invisible history that you cannot see. A history of days when they wanted to quit, moments when they doubted themselves, nights when they stared at the ceiling wondering if anything would ever change. The difference is that while most people spend their lives trying to avoid those moments, strong people were shaped by them. Strength isn't a gift. It's what remains after life repeatedly removes everything that was never real. And if you've ever wondered why some people seem unshakable while others fall apart under the same pressure, the answer begins long before anyone notices their confidence. It begins in places where no applause exists. Nobody wakes up one morning transformed. There is no single event that suddenly turns someone into the kind of person who can face uncertainty without collapsing. Instead, it happens quietly. Life begins taking away the things you thought would always protect you. A plan fails. Someone leaves. A dream that once felt guaranteed slowly disappears. You reach for certainty, but life offers none. At first, this feels unfair because you've been taught that effort should always produce reward and that doing the right thing should make life easier. But reality follows different rules. Sometimes the hardest working people lose first. Sometimes the kindest people are hurt the deepest. Sometimes the strongest effort still ends in disappointment. That realization doesn't make you stronger immediately. It simply removes the comforting illusion that life is predictable. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They think suffering itself creates strength. It doesn't. Pain alone changes nothing. Two people can experience the exact same hardship and become completely different afterward. One becomes bitter, suspicious, and emotionally trapped inside the worst day of their life. The other slowly develops a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them. The difference isn't what happened. It's what they learned while it was happening. Strength is never produced by pain alone. It is produced by the meaning you build from surviving it. The first lesson hardship teaches is something most people spend years resisting. You cannot control everything. For someone who has spent their life believing that enough planning can eliminate uncertainty, this realization feels terrifying. But eventually something happens that no amount of preparation can stop. Suddenly you discover that control was always an illusion. And strangely, once that illusion disappears, something unexpected replaces it. You stop wasting energy fighting reality exactly as it is. Instead of demanding that life become easier, you quietly become more capable of meeting whatever arrives. That shift changes everything because resilience doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from adapting to it. Think about how children learn to walk. Nobody expects perfection after the first attempt. Falling is treated as part of learning rather than proof of failure. Yet somewhere along the way adults reverse that logic. Every mistake becomes evidence that they aren't good enough. Every setback feels permanent. Every rejection feels personal. Strong people aren't immune to those emotions. They've simply learned to stop treating temporary struggles as permanent identities. They fail without becoming failures. They lose without believing they're destined to lose forever. That distinction seems small, but it quietly separates people who keep growing from people who stop trying. There is another experience that quietly shapes almost every resilient person: disappointment. Not the dramatic kind that everyone notices, but the slow disappointment that arrives when reality refuses to match expectations. You imagine your life unfolding one way, and instead it unfolds another. At first you keep waiting for things to return to the original plan. Eventually you realize they never will. This realization feels like grief because you're not only losing what happened. You're losing what you believed would happen. Strong people are often those who learn to let go of imaginary futures without giving up on creating new ones. That process changes the way you see yourself. When everything is going well, confidence often depends on circumstances. You feel capable because life keeps confirming it. But when those confirmations disappear, something deeper has to take their place. Real confidence is born when you continue moving despite uncertainty instead of waiting for certainty to return. It's quieter than arrogance because it doesn't need constant proof. It has already survived moments that should have destroyed it. One of the least understood parts of becoming stronger is loneliness. Not because strong people choose isolation, but because growth often happens during periods when very few people truly understand what you're carrying. There are seasons where everyone around you only sees your behavior while remaining completely unaware of the internal battle producing it. You continue showing up while privately questioning everything. Those moments rarely become stories people celebrate later, yet they often become the foundation of resilience. You discover that sometimes your greatest conversations happen silently, inside your own mind, as you decide whether to keep going one more day. Eventually something subtle begins to change. The situations that once overwhelmed you no longer have the same power. Not because life became easier, but because your perspective became larger than your problems. You stop assuming every obstacle is the end of your story. Instead, you recognize familiar emotions. Fear still appears. Doubt still visits. Anxiety still whispers the same old predictions. But now they've become familiar visitors instead of permanent residents. Experience has quietly taught you that emotions are powerful, but they are not always accurate predictions of reality. This transformation is almost invisible from the outside. People often mistake it for natural confidence. They assume you've always been composed because they never witnessed the years that shaped your composure. They see the calm response but not the countless moments when panic once controlled your decisions. They admire the patience without realizing it was purchased through years of frustration. They respect your discipline without seeing how many times you failed before learning consistency. The strongest qualities in people are almost always built in private long before they become visible in public. There's another paradox hiding beneath all of this. Strength doesn't remove vulnerability. In fact, it often increases your willingness to face it honestly. Weakness spends enormous energy pretending nothing hurts. Real strength quietly admits when something does while refusing to let that pain become the author of the entire story. That is why resilient people often appear emotionally steady rather than emotionally numb. They haven't escaped difficult feelings. They've learned that feelings can exist without controlling every decision. As time passes, you begin noticing patterns that were impossible to see before. Many of the moments you once wished had never happened eventually became the experiences that taught you the most. The failure that embarrassed you forced you to develop skills you never would have pursued otherwise. The uncertainty that terrified you revealed abilities you didn't know you possessed. The difficult season that seemed meaningless slowly became the reason you can now remain calm when others panic. Looking backward, the pieces finally begin connecting, even though they felt completely unrelated while you were living them. This doesn't mean suffering should be romanticized. Nobody should seek hardship simply because it can produce growth. Pain is still painful. Loss is still loss. Grief still changes people. But human beings possess an extraordinary ability to transform experiences that once seemed unbearable into foundations for wisdom. Not because those experiences were good, but because refusing to let them define the rest of life became an act of quiet courage repeated over and over again. Perhaps that is what strength really is. Not an emotion. Not a personality trait. Not the absence of fear. Strength is the gradual accumulation of evidence that you can survive more than your mind once believed possible. Every challenge you endure becomes another reminder that you have already faced uncertainty before. Every difficult chapter becomes another page proving that endings are often disguised as beginnings until enough time has passed to reveal the difference. The strange thing is that when people finally become strong, they rarely feel powerful. They simply feel different. Less desperate for certainty. Less controlled by temporary emotions. Less dependent on everything going according to plan. Their confidence isn't loud because it no longer needs to convince anyone. It has been tested in places where no audience existed. It has been shaped by moments that never became stories, victories that no one applauded, and choices that seemed insignificant until they accumulated into a completely different person. So if you're living through a chapter that feels heavier than you expected, remember this. The people you admire were not handed a secret version of life with fewer hardships. They were shaped by the same uncertainty that now stands in front of you. The difference is that they eventually stopped asking why difficulty had found them and started discovering what it was quietly teaching them. They didn't become strong because life was gentle. They became strong because life demanded more than they thought they could give, and little by little, they discovered they had more to offer than they ever imagined. Years from now, someone may look at you and wonder how you remained so calm when everything around you is falling apart. They will see the composure, the patience, the quiet confidence, and assume you were simply born that way. They won't know about the invisible battles that taught you to breathe through uncertainty instead of running from it. They won't know about the dreams that ended, the expectations that dissolved, the days that forced you to rebuild yourself without anyone noticing. They'll only see the finished sculpture, never the countless blows of the hammer that shaped it. And perhaps that's the final truth about strength. It is almost always invisible while it is being built. Only later does the world mistake it for talent, when in reality it was forged, one difficult day at a time.